make it live.
Yes. Just trying.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to a new day at TiECON 2020. We have an interesting lineup of mentoring masterclasses today, 3 back-to-back mentoring masterclasses. We start with the first one today. We have Mr. Ajay George Varghese, Managing Director of Bipha Ayurveda and Thai Kerala Charter member, who would be anchoring this session on this mentoring masterclass on sales. Over to you, Ajay.
Thank you very much, Nirmal, and a very good morning to all of you. I think it's probably the start of the day in India, and I think it's a bit too early, but I believe this session is going to be a very, very interesting session as we are going to talk about sales. And for most of us who's on the audience side, we'd be wondering what sales is all about. Hey, we already know everything about sales. So this was one question I asked Raj. And I was, in fact, mentioning to Raj whether, we should change the title. And he said, sales is sales, and there's a lot to talk about sales. You don't need to make any other permutation and combination on sales. So I said, okay, let's have it as sales, and let's hear from you what sales is all about. So just to give a quick intro of Mr. Raj Jaswa. In fact, he's got a very, very colorful, career. In fact, he started on from IIT Mumbai as an with a graduation in electrical engineering, and then went on to the Silicon Valley or on to the US as every other Indian would love to go, and had worked for Intel for quite a long time, and had been had worked with clients like the major Fortune 500 companies, and in fact, while he was working for Intel, I think there was this, the Darwin, Apple, falling on the Darwin's head. I think he would probably, if we're lucky enough, would probably share that story of how he became an entrepreneur. And he's in fact founded a company called Opti, which was in fact one of the, Opti makes chipsets, which has been used by Packard, Dell, and Compaq. I'm sure that most of our computers would be using the Opti chipsets. This was way back in 1993. That was his first entrepreneurial initiative, and he exited that company with $1 million valuation. It's about 350 million at its peak level. Went on to again, he exited from that company, and Ms. Raj went on to again establish as a serial entrepreneur. He's established a company called Selectica, which became a leading software configuration vendor for most of the Fortune 500 companies. And Selectica eventually went on to be a Fortune 500 company, again, with a $1 billion valuation. So, you have a billionaire talking to us, I'm sure, but Raj didn't say how much he got out of the deal, but then he said that is exactly what the valuation of the company was. In fact, after his stint with his exit from Selectica, I think he went on to be a volunteer for Thai Silicon Valley and worked on as a director from in Thai Silicon Valley from 2003 to 4, and subsequently became the president of Thai Global from 2005 to 8. Again, the entrepreneurial bug, I think, bit him. So I guess entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs always. They always come back to do what they best know. And he founded this company called as Dino, which is a user-friendly communication platform which seamlessly transport audio, video, text, graphics, and voice for life. So that's quite what's happening currently, right? Because we share a lot of these stuff, in the pandemic. So last 6 months, I'm sure, again, the numbers are going up for him. Yes, so he's also teaching in IIT Mumbai. Gandhinagar is a faculty, and he teaches engineering entrepreneurship. So and he's an avid hiker, as I understood, and he didn't disclose much, but I said I understand that he does a lot of hiking. So today we have in fact Raj, and Raj in fact believes, I would just go back to the theme where, I guess sales is what we believe, but let's understand if there's anything more to sales than what we know, number one. And Raj, I mean, it's indeed a very, very long session. We'll have about 2 hours of very interesting master classes from Raj. In fact, a few points which I understood while talking to him is, number one, see, we see sales as a function, but for an entrepreneur to be successful, sales is a key function, because without the dough, the machine is not going to work. So I guess that's exactly what Raj says, and I'm sure that that's exactly what it is. But how much importance do we give to sales is a very, very, very critical thing that we need to all us entrepreneurs think about. Number one. Two, sales as a process, because we see sales as a function, but sales as a process. The moment we see sales as a process, that's when we understand how much value that single function can create for the entire organization. The third important point is, how much importance do we give to the sales function? Because we always see sales as a department, but and we leave it there. But I guess that is the most important department, like production, like finance, where we need to, the entire organization needs to support to make a big success out of what they do. And Raj would also give us a few case studies, because it's not just going to be a class, but also going to be a very interactive class, wherein we'd have some case studies on very, very successful salesmen. He'd probably give us an example of what a successful salesman should be. And believe me, this guy has gotten $57 million from a single customer. And that's about 335 crores. So that's exactly what today's session is all going to be. It's going to be a very, very interesting session. The first meeting which I had with Raj, I think it almost extended to 1.5 hours of, I guess, a bit of mentoring for me as well. And I really enjoyed it. I'm sure that you'd have a wonderful day opening with a session. And we should have, there would be a Q&A session at the end. And I would love everybody to make notes of what your questions should be, so that we can probably ask all those questions at the end of this session, and we'll leave the next couple, maybe 1.5 hours to Raj. And over to you, Raj. And thanks a lot for making it. I'm sure that you're about 11 hours away from us. Still, I think you've been so kind enough to be here today and be talking to us. Thanks a lot, and over to you, Raj. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajay, for that very generous introduction. Really appreciate it. And I think the way we want to conduct this particular session is to tell you a lot of stories, because guess what? Stories is what people remember, and stories is how people, learn things that become a part of their life, so that, you go ahead and learn how to do new things better and do it right. Yeah. So today, I was so happy that Nirmal invited me to go ahead and teach sales, and gave me a lot of time. 2 hours is like is lovely, and so I think it's going to be a very, very fun session. I think would love to have your questions. As you think of them, just write them down, key them in, and Ajay will get them to me at the right times, right? Now, in my discussion with Ajay, what became very interesting for me is Ajay himself is an amazing guy. We are so lucky to have Ajay hosting this show, because he is actually a unique kind of entrepreneur, because he has taken a family business that started in 1929, 90 years ago, and is reinventing it. And at some point, I'll probably tell the story of how I actually bought one of Ajay's products, and it saved my life. So it's like, I don't know how the nature figured out how to connect the two of us together and have this session come together. But we will tell you that story sometime during the next 2 hours. Anyway, so let's figure out this sales thing, right? So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll be more than happy to actually share this deck with you. You just have to write to the organizers of TI and you'll get a copy of this deck, or you can just do a screen capture at the right time in order to, capture the slides. Only 6 slides, and so it should be easy enough to capture. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so basically today's session is called sales. And I am saying sales is the equivalent of trust. Now, trust is exactly what your customer needs to have in you if you are going to get the sale, right? So what is this trust? And it is obviously an acronym, TRUST, and we will find out what this trust, getting the customer to trust you, what is that all about? And what is it that salespeople are trying to do in order to earn the customer's trust? And remember, the customer's trust has to be gotten for life, for the longest while, because a salesman essentially has to sell products very often to the same person for 30 to 40 years. All of us think that a sales is something that just happens in a day or two, and you finish the transaction, you ship him the product, you collect the money, and the sale is done. But in reality, for good salespeople, the customer, once he earns that customer's trust, it's a relationship that ultimately becomes more valuable than that sale. And that relationship is going to provide dividends for the salesman for life, for 20, 30 years. He might change his job 5 times. But guess what? In every company that he goes to, the customer remains the same. He's going to sell products of the new company to the same customer. So earning trust is really what salespeople do. And if you want to be the top salesperson in your profession, then you have to develop relationships and keep them alive for your entire career. Just to give you one story, in 1985, I called on a customer who was actually a college kid in Austin, Texas, who in his dorm room was building PCs. Nobody ever thought that a PC can be built in a dorm room. And, this student from this dorm room in Texas was buying more and more Intel CPUs. And so since I was a product manager at Intel, I said, who's this school kid who's buying so many microprocessors from Intel? So I fly into Austin, Texas. I end up going to a dorm at University of Texas in Austin. And this kid has taken 3 dorm rooms and made that into a company. In one dorm room, he is, taking orders, talking to customers, collecting money, accounting. All the functions are being done in one dorm room. The next dorm room we walk into, he's actually assembling PCs. All these PCs are opened up, and the people with other students with screwdrivers, they're putting PCs together. And in the third dorm room, he's got all these PCs being shipped out, right, left, and center. And I said, wow, this is amazing. In the dorm room of University of Texas, a student, instead of going to classes, has got a business going. And I said, this kid is special. And I, you know, went back to Intel and said, yes, we have to support this customer. He's going to be super successful in life, and he's going to become our biggest customer. And they said, what? School kid? But uh, we allocated him whatever CPUs he wanted, 286, 386, etc. And he became more and more and more successful. In fact, he dropped out of college because he became so successful. And that relationship that I built with, guess who? Michael Dell. I built a relationship with Michael Dell when he was a school kid at University of Texas, starting his Dell Computers business, custom Dell Computers business. And that relationship where I supported him resulted in, when I switched companies from Intel to Chips and Technologies, he became Chips' biggest customer for chipsets. When I switched from Chips and Technologies and started my own chipset company, Opti, he became my biggest customer, buying my Opti chipsets for the next 7 years. Then when I started Selectica, which was a configuration company, he became my biggest customer and gave me a $10 million order for configuring his Blade servers and his computers, PCs. So you can see that over 30 years, my sales relationship with one customer has yielded tens and tens of millions of dollars of business from wherever as my career changed and Dell Computer progressed. But so what a salesman does is builds up trust for a lifetime. Doesn't matter which company he's working for, what products he's selling, but his relationship, one-on-one relationship with the customer does not change, and it's based on trust. And we will understand what are the elements of trust and how do you earn that trust, which will give you sales for a long, long time and ultimately be the difference between success and failure for whatever you're doing. Okay, so what is sales? Oh my God. Sales is figuring out which market you want to go to. How do you go to the market? How do you develop a new market? How do you cover a market? What kind of channels do you use? What is your sales process? How do you organize your sales organization? How do you measure a salesman's success? How do you compensate them? How do you manage changing? And my God, sales is so many, many things. How are you going to learn about sales in 2 hours? And here, Ajay and I were saying that we are going to teach you everything that you need to know about sales in 2 hours. But sales is actually a ton of things. So let's see, where we want to really focus, because most of the things that you see on this chart are functions that have to be executed in the sales department that are fairly administrative. But what you need to master is the art of building relationship, the art of convincing a prospect that you can be trusted to take care of that customer's needs in the right way for now and for a long time, right? So that art is not an administrative function. That art is something that really requires the kind of teaching that we are trying to do in the next hour or so. And so that is what we are trying to teach you. The art, the essence of sales, which is earning the trust of customer, not only to get that one deal, to sell that one Ayurveda product, or to sell one computer, or to sell a piece of software, or to sell your services, or to convince an investor to invest in you. No, that is only the first transaction, which should lead to a lifetime of transactions, right? So that's what we are trying to achieve in sales. How to set yourself up for a lifetime of transactions with another being by earning their trust, right? So forget this particular chart. It's a very important chart. But when you hire a VP of sales, director of sales, who's been in business doing sales for the last 20 years, they'll be able to do all of this. What you have to do is figure out what is the essence of sales, right? What is it as an entrepreneur going to help you understand the sales process? So sales process is actually quite simple. There are these 5 or 6 steps: prospecting, finding who's a potential sales customer, figuring out whether he's right for your product or not, then making a presentation, trying to close the deal, and the customer says, oh, I'm not ready to buy the product as yet. So listening to the objections, overcoming the objections, and then finally getting the PO, purchase order. And most important is that in the process, if you're going to successfully execute the sales process, you have to listen. You have to listen to the customer every step along the way and understand them. And most important, convince them you are listening and understanding and empathizing and are really on their side. You're not on your company's side. You are on their side, right? So you are trying to convince the customer during the interaction that you're listening to the customer, you're understanding the issue, you empathize with the problems that the customer has got and the issues that the customer has got, and you are really a partner on their side rather than your company's side. Obviously, your company is going to deliver the product, your company is going to give you the commission, but really you are the advocate for the customer, right? You are the customer's advocate, and you are there to see that the customer is successful and happy, right? So very simple sales process. And we'll try to figure out why this thing is so damn hard. That's what we're trying to try and figure out. Why is it so hard to do something that appears to be so simple? So in the trust method, winning trust, what you'll learn is that before you can engage with a customer, somehow or the other you need to develop trust. He needs to trust you to go to the next step. And after you get the trust, the next thing he needs to do is respect you. So he needs to trust you, he needs to respect you, then you have to understand, and then you have to sell, and finally you have to transact. A lot of people think that sales is the last two steps, which is selling and transaction. And if you think that's what selling and transaction is, you will probably be an unsuccessful salesman, and you will be struggling for your whole life to basically, even put food on your table. So the difference between an unsuccessful salesman and a successful salesman is that they are very good at the last two steps, selling and transaction, but the place where they earn the customer's confidence is in the first three steps: establishing trust, getting the customer's respect, and understanding what the customer's needs are and issues are, and getting all of that. So let's figure out what this is. So the next chart is probably the most important slide in your life. And you need to capture this slide and probably blow it up and print it and blow it up and attach it in your office, in your company, wherever you are, because this sales diamond tells you everything about how you are going to sell and how your company is going to sell, and how your company and your salespeople and your management is going to end up with relationships with customers that last a lifetime. Okay, so you'll see that the title talks about sales strategy for product, service, business, capitalization. Capitalization is raising money for your company. So doesn't matter what you're trying to transact, what you're trying to sell. You're selling a product like Bipha Ayurveda, they're selling a product, or you're selling a service, or whether you're selling your company, a business, or a share of your company through an M&A transaction, or you're trying to raise money, sell a small piece of your company for 10% of your company for 10 crore rupees, or could be 10,000 rupees, but doesn't matter. If you are doing any of these sales transactions, you have to follow the sales diamond. Even when you're selling your product through e-commerce online platform, you still have to follow the sales diamond process. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. That doesn't matter what channel you're selling, whether you're selling through a distributor, you're selling through direct sales, you're selling through a partner, you're selling through an online sales channel, you still have to follow the sales diamond as explained here. Now, the sales diamond is actually 5 diamonds, which have to be followed in the following sequence. You start off with relationship, then you go through process, then you go into value, then you go into options, and then you go into economic logic. So there are 5 diamonds encompassed in this diagram, which is the sales diamond. Okay, so this sales diamond is what encapsulates on one screen everything that you need to know. Okay, so in order to understand this, I should probably tell a story, because I had an MBA. After being an IT engineer, doing bachelor's and master's in EE, I was a very good technologist, very good design engineer. And then I said, hey, I want to also get into business in America. So I said, how do you transition from engineering to business? So I said, oh, maybe I should get an MBA. So I got an MBA. So I got my MBA, and then I joined Intel in the marketing group. And, over 6-7 years that I was at Intel in marketing, I did business with all kinds of people. And you heard the Dell story. So obviously did it with Dell, with IBM, with Compaq, with Fujitsu, Japan, all kinds, Samsung, and all kinds of companies. I was selling microprocessors for Intel and chipsets for Intel. And, lots of Intel salespeople would invite me to go and give presentations to their customers and so on, as happened in the Dell computer case. And that's how, I learned about sales by just watching the salesmen during some meetings where they would invite me in for 30 minutes to give a presentation about a new microprocessor I was launching, or some new other chipsets I was launching, and peripheral chips I was launching, and so on. And, I really did not understand sales. But, I did my part, or I thought I understood sales, but, I was really a marketing guy. And then I left Intel to join a smaller company called Chips and Technologies, where again, I was in marketing. And my team had developed a new chipset. And, we in Chips used to sell a lot of these chipsets to Taiwanese and Korean and Japanese customers. So, I trained my Far East sales team about my new chipset. And then the VP of sales came into my office and said, Raj, I'm planning to launch your chipset in the Far East and introduce your chipset. So why don't do you want to come with me and actually do the sales marketing presentation for your chipsets? And I said, wow, for 2 weeks, I'll get a chance to see real customers. And I was excited about going for 2 weeks to the Far East. Go to Taiwan, go to Japan, go to Korea, and Hong Kong, Singapore, and back, five countries for 2 weeks. And I was super excited about marketing and selling my product and so on, right? So I was doing all of that. So I was excited. I prepared the best PPT package. I prepared all the benchmarks. I prepared all the collateral, the brochures. I prepared some demo boards. I prepared the performance benchmarks and compatibility reports. I prepared all the marketing collateral. And I was excited to go and sell my product to real customers, right? So we get into the plane, and after this long 15-hour flight, we get to Taipei. And then this salesman says, look, we've just reached Taipei after 15 hours. It's 7 in the evening. And he said, starting at 8 a.m., we are going to see 6 customers per day. We've got 1 hour per customer for promoting the chipset. And I was excited. I woke up very early, got everything ready, and I was ready with my marketing collateral and ready to go and sell, right, my new chipset. And so we go and visit the first Taiwanese customer. It is a small office in a big multi-rise building. And I walk in, a small conference room, and I set up the PowerPoint presentation, etc. And and then the customer walks in, and then Steve Shank, who was the VP of Sales, American guy, uh, he starts talking to this customer and says, "How are you, Mr. Chu? How's your family? How is the business going? What problems do you have?" And we had 1 hour, and after that we had a second customer after the next hour, and then on and on and on. And suddenly 15 minutes are gone. And my presentation is like a 1 hour presentation, and he's already taken 15 minutes just talking stuff with this customer. And then suddenly half an hour goes by, and I am getting very, very upset, because how am I going to present my new chipset? It's a 40, 50-page slide presentation with all kinds of features and functionality and benefits and performance and all the stuff, benchmarks and everything. And 30 minutes are gone by. And then Steve Shank, and I try to interrupt Steve Shank, and Steve Shank, he just goes on and on and on with this customer and says, and talks about, the customer having competition from some other vendors, and, how some of this PC manufacturers, distributors in the US were complaining about some quality issues and everything, and performance issues and everything, and heat issues and everything. And 45 minutes are gone, and he says, Steve Shank says, "Raj, why don't you present your new chipset?" And I'm saying, "Steve, my presentation is 1 hour long. You've only given me 10 or 15 minutes to present this thing. How am I going to do it?" And Steve says, "Raj, just present." I said, I went through the first 5, 6 slides, and the time was over. And Steve Shank says, "Okay, we've got to go to the next meeting." And I was mad. As soon as we walked out of that office, I told Steve, you brought me 15 hours of flying, 10,000 miles, and you give me 15 minutes to sell my chipset? My presentation is 1 hour long. How am I going to there's no way this customer is going to buy a product. And Steve Shank said, "Raj, what are the problems this customer had?" He had a quality issue because he was getting a 10% fallout in his manufacturing line. He told us that. He had his customers who were complaining about heat issues for the product. He was running into some cost problems competing with, and did you answer any of these customers' questions? Was your new chipset, could it have solved these 3 problems that the customer was worried about? And how much time would answering those 3 questions that the customer had taken if you had focused on just those 3 areas in the presentation? Would it have taken 10 minutes? Maybe, probably less. So I gave you all the time you needed to address the customer's issues. You put this 50-slide presentation, you did first 5, 6 slides and did not answer the 3 issues that the customer had. You see the problem? And suddenly I understood that what Steve was doing was actually telling me what the issues were that the customer had. And all I had to do was explain how these 3 issues could be addressed by my chipset, which could do 100 other things. But if I can solve these 3 problems, Steve Shank can close the deal. And so, What a lesson. And then Steve said, Raj, do you understand that the three things that he shared with us, he's not going to tell anybody else, but he just told me? The reason he told me is because he trusts me. He knows that I care about him. He knows that I will not take his secrets and share it with other PC manufacturers in Taiwan and Korea and Japan and Hong Kong. He knows I do business with everybody, but he trusts me. And that, without that trust, he would not have told me what the three problems are, right? That are most bothering him. And all you had to do was answer these three problems, and I could have then negotiated the deal and closed the deal. In 5 minutes, I could have closed the deal, right? But you took all the 15 minutes, you did not answer the three issues that they had. What am I going to close, right? So, and that was how I realized that a salesman is different than a marketing person. A marketing person has got this laundry list of anything and everything that the world can need for the product. But customers would love all the other things, but they are really concerned about a few. And for this particular customer, it was these three issues. For the next customer, it's going to be next three issues. For the customer after that, it's going to be something else. So you can see that if a marketing person goes ahead and starts talking about, kind of the technology and the process, manufacturing process, and the testing coverage, and all of these things with somebody for whom that's a low priority thing, then what is going to happen is the customer is not going to buy a product because he doesn't care about it, right? So for some reason, my sharing has stopped. Hang on. Did they go ahead and change anything?
No, I don't think so. Just 1 second. Anup, can you just check?
I'll share it again. I'll check. I'll share it again. Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So basically, what Steve Shank taught me that day, and remember, I had been a marketing at Intel, I'd been a marketing, 15, 17 years in the business, and I had never understood the sales process. Believe it or not, most businessmen and most engineers do not understand the sales process. They don't understand how the sales process works. And that's why they get so many rejections. So after that, we visited another customer. And this time, while Steve Shank was asking his questions, building up trust, asking questions, I was making a note. Oh, I should cover integration issues. I should cover quality issues. I should cover, cost issues. And this is the priority. And go ahead and focus on those. In fact, after that, I would not only make these issues, but as soon as I started my presentation, I would walk over to the board and say, okay, Mr. Customer, thank you so much for telling us what the issues you're facing. Number one, you've got heat problems. Number two, you've got production yield problems. Number three, you've got cost issues in priority number 1, 2, 3. Is that correct? And he says, yes. Then let me tell you how a new chipset can address this issue, this issue. And then I would shut up. And then Steve Shank has got the next 10 minutes in order to close the deal by saying, okay, when do you want the samples, Mr. Customer? This is up, if you place an order today, we'll deliver it on this particular date. This is going to be the price. This is going to be a volume price. And he can start the negotiation process and pick up the PO in the evening or so you can see that after that, all meetings after that, I started seeing a world-class salesman in action. And what a world-class salesman does is that he first establishes trust in the customer. The customer needs to trust that the salesman has his best interest at heart, so that he will start sharing his deepest secrets. Production yield is such a secret information for a PC manufacturer. Heat problems, such a secret information, because if all of the competitors figure out that he's got a heat problem in the PCs that he's building, they will destroy his entire business by attacking that particular problem, right? So, but if he does not share that problem, I won't know what problem to address, right, with my chipset. So Steve Shank has to figure out, after establishing trust, by asking questions, what are the real difficult things that the customer is facing, so that he gets the deepest secrets from the customer, right? So the first step was establishing relationship in the meeting. The next step was asking questions, so that he figures out what are the real problems that the customer is worried about, caring about. And then you promote the value of your solution for addressing the problems that the customer is really facing, right? So the problems that the customer is really facing is figured out, is responded to when you're selling the value. So there are so many approaches to selling. You can do solution selling, consultative selling, all kinds of approaches can be used, and a lot of people think that is all sales does, but in reality, it is knowing which sales technique to use given the problems that have been uncovered during the first 2 diamonds of the sales diamond. Once the customer says, okay, I'm convinced your new chipset is going to solve the problem. Now, you go and discuss whether, from a price and a business standpoint, whether the customer is ready to make the jump. And you use something called BATNA, which is, a real negotiating technique in order to figure out, what are the terms and conditions of the deal, and how the whole deal is going to be transacted, so that the customer shifts over to your new product. And once that is done and all the issues are done, the deal is closed, and a lot of junior and amateur salespeople forget the last diamond. When is a sale transacted? When you get the order? Ajay, is a sale transacted when you get the order?
Not really.
Exactly. It's only when you get paid, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If Ajay, if you're not paid for a product that you shipped, that's not a sale, right?
Better don't sell, yeah.
that you don't count it as a sale. In fact, it's probably a loss.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so a lot of amateur salespeople think that just because they got the order, that became a sale. But Ajay knows, since he's running a business, that a sale is really when you get paid for what you delivered. And in order to make that process happen seamlessly, a salesman has to execute the last diamond, which is he has to communicate the business logic for why the customer agreed to the deal during the options diamond is the right decision for the company, right? The economic logic establishes why that deal that was negotiated is the right deal for the company, not just the manager. Because who's going to approve the payment, Ajay?
The finance guy.
The finance
manager,
guy.
right?
Exactly. The manufacturing guy will have to qualify the product. Engineering guy will have to probably, figure out how to use the new chip design or product or service. Whereas the company and all its functions have to come together, believing the purchasing guy or whoever did the transaction that this was the right thing for the company. Otherwise, Ajay is not going to get paid.
100%.
And the CEO is going to be chasing the accounts payable people in order to get the money. Because the cost of an unpaid product wipes out 80% or 4 times of the products that have to be sold in order to earn the money back, right? So to recover, to see that that accounts payable gets 100% payment for every order that is being taken, the salesman needs to communicate the economic logic so that the entire company understands why this is the right thing for the whole company. The finance guy, the director of engineering, the director of manufacturing, the director of quality, director of customer service, the entire company should all understand why this was a very good decision made by the buyer or for that product that you were selling. So that economic logic has to be communicated. And if that is not done, and the salesman says, look, I got a PO, I got a PO, I got a PO, basically the company is potentially going to have a hard time collecting the money because the CFO will say, why do we need this product? The QA guy says, hey, nobody took my approval for using this new chipset. A manufacturing guy will say, oh, we don't have the machinery to handle this kind of new product or whatever it is. So you can see that economic logic has to be done. It's work that has to be done even after getting the PO so that the payment ultimately comes for the products and services that have been delivered or the capitalization deal that has been done. For example, one of the first problems that an entrepreneur is going to walk into is to start his company, he needs to raise money, right? He needs to raise money. I basically, when I started Selectica, visited venture capitalists and convinced them that, we had a very exciting product, an exciting team, and exciting this and exciting technology. And the VC said, yes, I'm excited. And he said, and, a group of 3 VCs came along and said, okay, we're going to give you $3 million for 25% of the company. And, we were celebrating. We were so excited that, we had this $3 million deal and we had done a shake hand on this $3 million deal for 25% of the company. And we were celebrating and we were happy, and etc. And guess what happened? The $3 million never came in. Just like, Ajay worries about getting the customer to pay for his Ayurveda products. As an entrepreneur, if I don't receive the $3 million for 25% of the company, I'm left hanging, right? And I have wasted, 3 months trying to promote, sell to VCs and not receive the money. And all of a sudden, I'm running out of time and money, and my company is going to go broke because I can't pay the bills, because if I don't raise money on time. So the capitalization deal that I had for Selectica for $3 million, essentially, because I did not communicate the economic logic so that the VCs who had agreed to the handshake deal could convince their partners that this was a deal worth taking, that this was a commitment, that was a beautiful deal for the VC firm, was not accepted. And they had to call me up, and say, I don't think we can do the deal. And that's exactly what happened to Selectica, where, and after getting that message, we basically had to, we looked at the bank, money in the bank. We had about $50,000 left. Our monthly expenses were like $25,000 or $30,000, and we were going to go broke in 6 weeks, right? And we said, okay, in 6 weeks we cannot convince another set of VCs to invest in our company, and the company was going to basically go under. So the mistake was that we did not write down the economic logic to convince the partners of the VC firms that were going to invest $3 million that, this was a great deal. And so what happened was we met, there were about 8 employees at that time. And we basically said, okay, we've got $50,000. It's going to take a long time to convince more VCs to take the money to invest. What can we do? And we said, okay, we cannot pay salary anymore. All the money that we've got is to go ahead and pay the rent on the office space. And by doing that, we can extend the runway for our business to 4 months. And that will probably give us time to go and talk to more VCs and see what we can do. And, we started contacting VCs again. And finally, one VC took our meeting. And, after talking to him, he said, I really like your technology. I really think you guys are onto something. But, you got no money in the bank. I'll put in $750,000 if you guys put in $250,000. So that was a capitalization deal that he offered us. Here we were going to get $3 million, and I'll take 25% of the company for $750,000. And so we looked at each other, my partners and me, and we said, okay, we will figure out how to put in $250,000 of our own money. You put in $750,000, and we'll give you 25% of the company. And that's how we got the capitalization deal done. And, you know, obviously the company did become successful. I think Ajay talked about the fact that we went public for a $5 billion valuation. And guess how much his $750,000 was worth? It was worth $600 million. He got a 600 times return for his $750,000 investment. But, you know, we did pretty well too. The rest, you know, we all did well. But the point is that if you don't realize that a deal is done, not when you do your handshake, but when all the people in all the different inside the companies are all going to be convinced that, you know, it's a good deal, right? So you have to communicate the economic logic. So when all of this comes together, now you got your sale, and your team, your company can ship its product, and the customer is going to pay for the product at the end of it. So in sales, whether you're doing a product or a service or selling your business or raising money, capitalization, you have to go through these 5 steps. So let's dig into some of these diamonds a little bit. So trust. How do you establish trust with a customer? You know, you're a vendor, the other one's a customer. How do you establish trust? So, you know, trust has to be established as a one-to-one personal relationship, right? So very often, you're going to say, I've never met the person. How am I going to establish trust with that person? And that's why there are these 5 points about how different ways in which trust can be established. If you've been doing business the way Steve Shank was doing business with these customers, then of course, partnership, history, longevity is going to help him. But if you don't have all of that, how will you establish trust? How about getting introduced by somebody that the customer already has a relationship with? And if they have a relationship with that customer that you're trying to reach, and they introduce you, and they inform the customer that, hey, you know, I've done business with Raj, and, you know, Raj has helped me become successful. And when I ran into problems with their product or their software, Raj saw to it that the problems would be solved. You can trust Raj. If you get introduced by somebody that Ajay trusts, then Ajay will take your business call and or sales call and say, hey Raj, I've heard good things about you, and you know, I'm willing to, you know, look at using your, you know, packaging design services or whatever. So if you have never done business with somebody, then you have to use some good introduction by somebody who gives you, or you can position yourself as an expert. You know, hey, you know, I know how to do online sales. Look, I've done so much online sales. So at some point, uh, Bipha Ayurveda will need to go online, but I've already done so much of online business for these other companies, and I can do it for you too. So if you show that you have expertise and and with due diligence, it can be validated, then you get your trust. So one way or the other, you have to get trust, because without trust, we can't go to the next step. So the next step is called process. So in process, you basically are not talking. In process, you're listening. You're asking questions one by one by one by one. You're asking questions about, hey, what's the budget, Ajay? You know, can you do it, or does somebody else, does the director of marketing needs to authorize this project? Do you want to do this in the next 3 months or the next 3 years? What is your need? Um, uh, are you having problems with your kind of thing? So you got to have the customer answering questions. You keep on asking questions, and obviously the customer is not going to answer those questions if he doesn't trust you, right? He's going to say, why are you asking me all these questions? Just tell me what you're selling. And the minute you start selling without knowing what questions to answer, that deal is already gone. You don't have that deal. So that is the next diamond, which is once you establish trust, now you go into the process of extracting the issues that the customer or the prospect has. So once he shares these deep concerns and problems and issues that he has in his business, now you can figure out what you want to sell, how you're going to sell, what is the approach. Should you make it a solution? Should you just base it on price? Should you base it on features? Should you base it on competitive value? So you figure out the right approach to address very specifically the issues that the customers that the process has brought to light, right? So you sell to exactly what the issues are. Once that is done, you go into negotiating the terms and conditions. That is a full scale negotiation. And you have to become really, really good at negotiations if you're going to go ahead and end up with a deal that you'll both agree with. And once that is done, I already explained the importance of communicating that through a memo or a memorandum of agreement, MOA, as to what the reason is why this is a wonderful deal for the customer and why you are committed to supporting the customer. Once that all of that comes together, you have a completed deal. Now we have a question from Akash, which is, what were the risks you faced and performed in financial management? So, you know, for an entrepreneur, guess what? The first thing that he has to sell is a piece of his company in order to raise money. So somehow or the other, even though if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you probably have no understanding of economics or finances or accounting or any of these things, you have to convince your investor that you are going to be a trustworthy caretaker of their money, right? You are going to be a caretaker of their money. You are going to spend it as though it is even more precious than your own money. That is what, as an entrepreneur, you need to communicate to the investor. The biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make is the minute they get their first investment, they automatically start spending money uh, because they've been running things on a shoestring budget for such a long time, and they suddenly see money in the bank, and they start, decorating the place, moving into a fancier place, buying good furniture, hiring a lot of employees. And guess what? The investor is getting nervous because the investor wants to see that the entrepreneurs are leveraging the money that they've given to increase the value of the company. If you put it in furniture, furniture depreciates over time. You get a big office, that office sucks money from the bank account. So it doesn't create new value for the investor. So basically, the investor is looking for entrepreneurs who are stingy with the money that investors have put in and are very good caretakers of the money that they've received from investors. And, so the financial management that you have to demonstrate as an entrepreneur is that you are even more diligent about taking care of the investor's money than you would have done any other way otherwise, right? So when I raised money from investors, I would demonstrate to them that I am a very good caretaker of their money. You know, I mean, you know, basically for Selectica, we raised like $35 million from venture capitalists. In our IPO, we raised $230 million from investors all over the world, right? From basically retail investors. And I was very clear in my mind that I have to be responsible for every dollar that I receive as investment, whether it's from a retail investor, a shareholder, or whether it is from a VC or a bank, doesn't matter who gives me the money. I have to be super responsible for the accountability of that money and for seeing that it generates the most value for the money that I've received. So that is basically how I, took care of building a trusting relationship with my investors. Why does establishing trust with my existing VC become important? Because guess what? VCs is a very small world. Even though there are probably maybe few hundred VCs in the whole world. And guess what? All these VCs talk to each other. They're all connected. And they all, will check behind your back and say, hey, do you think Raj is a trustworthy guy? Do you think I can invest in him? So they all talk with each other. So if I think that I can, be irresponsible with my first VC's money, guess what? I am messing up my opportunity to get VC money from the remaining, 200 VCs, right? So seeing that you end up with a trusting relationship with your very first investor is very important, because it is a small world out there who all decide whether you can be trusted or not. To overcome bad trust is very, very hard. It's very, very hard to overcome bad trust, right? So So that is something that everybody needs to be careful about. So how much time do we have, Ajay?
I think we have just 45 minutes more, so we'll probably have another half an hour left, and we'll keep the
Okay.
last 15 minutes for question and answer. So we'll just keep those
Okay.
question and answers for the end.
Yeah. So now that we've understood how a sales process works, I want you to actually see a real salesman. Ajay and I are businessmen. You know, we have to master the same sales technique and the art of selling as our best salespeople, but we'll never be as good as them. We just won't. Because just like to be a world-class tennis player, uh, it requires talent. We are developed talents. You know, we are talents that had to learn how to sell, and so our developed talent can never be good as original talent plus a lot of practice, right? So what you need to see is what a world-class salesman looks like and how they think. And that's what we are going to do right now. So can Nirmal, can you run the YouTube video clip on Rob Milks?
Yeah.
Rob Milks was my Top Gun salesman at Selectica. He sold and closed the biggest deal in Selectica's history, almost $57 million from one customer. And, you know, it's worth listening to somebody who can get $57 million or 300 crores from one customer over 2 or 3 years. So let's see. Go ahead.
Can we have the videos, please? Yeah, just one second. Can we have the video, please?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Raj.
How you get your company from nothing. And the bold statement is most people really suck at sales. They're terrible. Or at best, they're just average and they're satisfied with being average. Now, most companies do not want to keep average salespeople around. They want superstars. They want people that can go out and make things happen. And that's how you get your company from nothing to multi-billion-dollar status. And there's no other way to do it except have good execution on the sales side. So why is it that some people really suck at this and a few people are really good at this? And one of the assessments that I've thought about over the years is that if you're bad at this, it's because you're letting your ego get in the way of your wallet. And you get in your own way. So what does it take to be a great salesperson? We're going to cover that in just a minute. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. And let me start out by saying, again, Raj, thanks for having me to talk to your students. This is quite an honor for me. And Raj has been a boss, a business mentor, but more importantly, a friend of mine for 22 years now. So we've got a lot of history together. So a little bit of background on me, very briefly. Been in the high-tech business since the early 80s. So do the math, you can figure out how old I am. I interviewed with Raj at Selectica when there was 26 folks. And this was back in the end of September, beginning of October in 19.
Is there a problem with the sound? Ananda, I think this. I'm sorry, I think there's some problem with the video. Just give us a few seconds. Nirmal, can you just share the video, please, quickly? I guess there is some difficulty in loading, Raj. So we'll just play it as soon as it's ready. We'll possibly start playing it. So can we'll love to save time now.
Okay, let's continue on with the pitch. Yeah. Okay, so let me share the presentation again. So the question is, how do you prepare? So we will figure out how you should prepare for your sales call, right? So we want to build trust, we know that. We want to go ahead and figure out what the issues are for the customer. And then we want to go ahead and make the sale. And then we want to close the deal, and then we want to generate the economic logic. So what is the process of preparation? So let's figure out how we're going to prepare. Okay, so how do you prepare for a sales call? Now, this is unfortunately a mistake that all salespeople make. Too many salespeople make. How about that? Not all. The mistake that all salespeople make is that they get so excited that the customer is willing to take a meeting that they just rush into the meeting without preparation. And I finally got to the point after, many wonderful meeting opportunities that resulted in no business. I finally made a rule in my company that no salesman is going to a sales meeting without preparing for at least 10 to 15 days these 9 items, right? So these are the 9 items that must be prepared, and the salespeople must have an understanding before they go ahead and try to sell anything in any meeting. So the first is the power sources and limits. What does power sources and limits say? Power sources and limits are the people that you're going to meet. Who are they? If it's a purchasing guy, what is his ability to negotiate? Or what is his ability to make a decision? If you're meeting a finance guy, what is his ability to negotiate or discuss the deal? If you meet a VP of engineering, what is his ability? So what is the decision-making capability of the people who are going to come into the meeting, right? So every person that can potentially walk into the meeting, who are they and what are their power sources and what is the limit of the decision-making capability that they're going to make? The second thing that I want the salespeople to prepare is to understand what is the market situation before you walk into a customer. So how is our product compared to everybody else's product? How is the market evolving? what is the stages of what approach is the competition taking. So product and market strategy should be well understood for that particular customer situation. The third thing that I want the salesman to have an answer to before he walks in is, what is the win-win strategy, which is, how do you do things where the customer wins and we also win at the same time? So business can never be I win, you lose. Guess what? That'll be a very short-term relationship, probably a transaction where you may not get paid for your sale. And so in business, everything has to be win-win. And if you've not figured out how it can be win-win, then what is the point of trying to sell, right? So even clearly we want to make a profit, right? But the customer needs to get a tremendous return for doing business with you. So if Bipha is selling some Ayurvedic product, then obviously Bipha is going to make good profit on the jar of ointment that he's going to sell, but the customer should have so much benefit that is way worth more than the profit that was given to Bipha Ayurveda, right? So the win-win strategy needs to be understood by the salesman before he goes into the transaction. Short-term and long-term relationship, what is going to happen and how is the customer's business going to evolve as time goes on? What will be the consequences of this deal and how will it set up for the next deal and the next deal and the next deal for the next umpteen years, right? The short-term and long-term consequences. Next point is setting reachable targets, which is, what is the target price that would be acceptable to every department inside your company and will be acceptable to the customer. So setting reachable targets for, obviously the marketing group would love to have, or the finance group in your company would love to have the maximum profit margin, but that may not be viable to a longer term relationship with the customer or from a competitive standpoint. So you have to negotiate inside the company, what is the opening price, what is the walk price, what is the target price. So setting these reachable targets, selecting the right team and the negotiating that is going to happen, right? So selecting the team that's going to go in. Motivation strategy. How are you going to motivate the customer to, go with this particular product? So that has to be figured out. Information gathering. You'll soon find out that selling is a lot about information rather than just the product itself. If you have the right information, then you are going to be successful in your sale against a competitor who only understands what a product does. So information, now where do you get that information from? And that requires all kinds of research. So I'll just give you something very simple to think about, which is, obviously I did business in US, Europe, Asia, wherever. And, most of the times my customers were all Americans or Europeans or whatever. And I would tell the salesman, if you ever see a single Indian inside the company that you're calling on, get that Indian's name and contact information and give it to me. And Ajay, can you guess why I did that? That Indian may not even be involved in buying the product. He might be a junior guy. He might be a QA guy. It could be anything, software guy, IT guy.
Yeah.
And why would I want that Indian's information from, why should the salesman get me that Indian's information? Why would I ask the salesman for the Indian's information?
It's about the market, right? Understand the market primarily.
I have to gather information about what's going on inside the company.
Yeah.
Inside the company. My salesman cannot get past, a few conference rooms or doors.
Yeah.
But the Indian who might be a junior guy or whatever is walking all over inside the company. He knows what's going on inside the company, whether they can make their payroll, whether they're making a lot of profit on this particular thing, or whether a competitor walked in the account inside the building the day before, or they're running short of some deliveries. Guess what? Employees of a company have all that information floating around them.
Yeah.
Even though they're not related to that product. And being an Indian guy and the CEO of an Indian company, of a Silicon Valley company, when the CEO calls a junior Indian IT engineer sitting at Olivetti in Milan, Italy, guess what happens? That Indian kid gets very excited that somebody who's the CEO is calling me. And guess what? He is willing to answer and share all kinds of information that's going on at Olivetti, all kinds of information that's going on inside Hewlett Packard, all kinds of information that's going on inside IBM. It doesn't matter if he's working at NEC Japan. You think the Japanese people or engineers will ever tell me what's going on inside NEC?
No.
But if there's an Indian IT guy doing a project and I call him up as CEO of Selectica or CEO of Opti, and say, hey, hi, how are you doing? And everything, you're at NEC in Tokyo, and and I build up a relationship with that guy. Guess what? He becomes my information source of anything and everything that's going on inside NEC or Olivetti or Hewlett Packard or IBM or whatever. So, as Indians, guess what? You can find Indians in just about every company in the world. And you can find Indians in all kinds of positions, in every kind of, and information is the key to your success in business and building up relationship with Indians who are scattered in every company in the world, at Amazon, at whatever. I mean, so basically all this information gathering, you have to use many, many different kinds of approaches in order to get it. Clearly, the salesperson has a lot of ways to do that. And the last one is decision-making strategy, which is you have to make a decision. Should we go ahead and commit to this customer? Should we do that? Should we do this? So these are the 9 building blocks of strategy where the salesman needs to be prepared with all of these 9 before he goes into any sales call. So you need to put that, and I need to probably blow up this particular pyramid because I know it's rather small, but essentially takes these 9 points and lays it out in a pyramid form so that you can go ahead and transact that sales diamond from the trust standpoint, from the process standpoint, from the selling standpoint, from the negotiating standpoint, to the economic logic standpoint. From all those points, you can get it right. Okay, looks like the video is working again. So why don't we run the video? We've got about 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, we will just play it out. Anoop, can you just play on the video, please? Thanks. Anoop, can you please play the video?
Yeah, they got it.
Briefly, been in the high-tech business since the early 80s. So do the math, you can figure out how old I am. I interviewed with Raj at Selectica when there was 26 folks. And this was back in the end of September, beginning of October in 1998. So it's been quite a while. And I was excited about the opportunity that he laid out and some other people that were there that laid out for me. And I told Raj right there, if you will hire me, I will not let you down. So principle one, go into an opportunity with the right attitude and with the right upfront expectation for the person that you're talking with. So fast forward, let me give you a couple of other tidbits. So let's examine, since I don't have much time, I'm gonna rush through this pretty quickly, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes at the end for some questions. So we asked the question, what does it take to be a good salesperson? And the answer is, if you're just a good salesperson, you suck. You're average. You want to be a great salesperson. You want to be a professional. The only way that you can become a pro doing this crazy world of sales is if you model a pro. So it's just like anything else that you really want to get good at. You have to find somebody that can mentor you and somebody that's done it and been there. I mean, one of the first things I do when I hire salespeople is say, look, show me your W-2. Show me how much money you've made. You put your money where your mouth is, because everybody talks a big game, right? But at the end of the day, I want to see the scoreboard. And so those are the people that I'm most interested in working with for a number of reasons. I'm not going to get into all those reasons. But what does it actually take to be a professional grade salesperson? One is, and these are in no particular order, but I was kind of thinking through some bullet points. One is you have to be a great storyteller, because people don't want to be salesy to death or slided to death with slides. They want to get right to the point. So one of the things that you need to be able to do is to build intrigue and then resolve that intrigue. Think about a good novel writer, especially one that's maybe like a Grisham, that's talking about legal aspects, and he builds all these intrigues into a story, and he gets you on the edge of your seat and you want to know more. So when you have a meeting with a prospect, your goal for that meeting is you want them to hear more. You want another meeting. You want a deeper dive. You want to build more value. You're building the intrigue. But you can't do that forever. That intrigue has to be resolved at some point. That resolve is where we take everything that we've told them up to that point, and we show them and share with them how the value is going to affect them personally. Here's one thing that we've discovered over the years in sales is it does not matter if you're selling gas turbines or rubber bands or software or whatever, it's still an emotional buy. Here's why. It's an emotional buy because that person that's buying from you and that team of people all have this thing called what's in it for me. What they're buying could affect their career. It could affect how they're seen by their peers. It could affect how they're seen by their boss. So if you make this about them and not you, then you'll have a much better success rate, and you'll keep their, you won't sound like every other salesperson that's walking through the door. A little bit more on intrigue, give you an example. So you may say something like, you know, if you don't take action on this until the end of the year, it's going to cost you $1 million or whatever it is. Immediately follow it up by resolving the intrigue. I'm not going to let that happen to you. We're going to work together. We're not giving them an option. We're going to work together on putting a plan together that eliminates those costs now and makes you look like a hero. Now, you see how that intrigue was built? We caused a problem, and then we answered the problem with value that was personalized back to that person. That's what they buy. So one of the things that has been hard to get across to salespeople over the years, and the ones that get it really know how to go out and sell it, and that is people don't actually buy your product. They don't buy your software. They don't buy your gas turbine. They don't buy your whatever. What they buy is the end result. If a rubber band would cure everything, they'd buy a box of rubber bands. So it's the end result that they are actually buying, and that's where the value comes from that. So what are some of the other things that you need to be a great salesperson? Integrity. Some salespeople are too salesy, and they come across disingenuine, and they want their words to flow, and they want to be this great presenter, and I could care less about that stuff. All I care about is getting the message across in a way that the person understands it and wants to pay you for it. At the end of the day, that's all that's important. And we're not going to ask them to pay for it or make a decision until we've given them, in my opinion, 10x the value that they're paying for. Once I've determined that they're getting that, and the responsibility to ask them for the order and to pay for something. And in return, they're going to get a lot of things. Now, along with that, you must be very direct. You can't be vague when you're building value. And everything, that's why you have to do your homework. So I see so many salespeople that wing it and don't prepare properly when they go into a sales talk or a sales meeting. And if I take that even a step further, it's an attitude. It's something that I walk in with, and that is a feeling, because this is all about feelings. I don't care what you're selling. You must care more about your customer than the commission check. If you will do that, the commission check will take care of itself. And I've gotten some very, very big ones signed by this man. So it's been a lot of fun, but you gotta do it right. So I always walk in with an attitude of, we are going to build a long-term relationship together. So to Raj's point on IBM, we started that sales campaign back in the end of '99, and to this day, all the executives, all of my champions inside of IBM, we still talk every quarter at least. We are still friends. We follow each other on Facebook. We kid each other. So these are the long-term relationships that I'm talking about. And if you come in with that attitude, and not this just disingenuine salesy type attitude, it will make a huge, huge difference. So build long-term relationships. So, and remember, they always are wondering, and they're not going to say this, but what's in it for me, or what's in it for them? And so you must build value for them personally. This builds trust automatically. You don't have to build something separately called trust, because it's there inherently. So let me give you another example. I'm going to brag on Raj a little bit about integrity. So back when Selectica was 30 folks, and I think we'd grown to, I don't know, 40, 50 at this time, I had a very serious motorcycle accident. And I was in the hospital paralyzed and was in literally for months. Now, Selectic at the time did not have any long-term or short-term disability insurance. And I had just moved into a new house. All my kids were toddlers, and I was in bad shape. So Raj and the board decided that they would continue to pay me, and they would continue to take care of me throughout my hospital stay and my rehabilitation. My rehabilitation took almost 6 months. But that integrity, and because he was willing to do that, and the company was willing to do that, and everybody was cheering for me, the loyalty that built, and this happens with your customers too, the loyalty that built, I think paid off pretty well, Raj. What do you think? So,
Absolutely.
So, and it's those things that build lifetime friendships, and people never forget that. If you take that same attitude with your customer, it's really a good thing. So another thing that you must have to be a true pro salesperson is you got to be courageous. There are no timid sales superstars, none. So you got to be able to ask the tough questions. You got to be able to look somebody in the eye and say, hey, here's what I think. I think that you're wrong. Now, you got to be very careful how you do that. You're leading somebody to a conclusion. And a lot of times in the sales situation, they don't know what they don't know. You're the expert. You're the one that can come in and say, done the right way, look, you may want to look at this a little bit differently because I have a different opinion on this based on this and this and this experience. And it's that experience that gives them the confidence to move forward. Otherwise, it sends up all kinds of yellow and red flags for them. The other thing that you have to be is tenacious. If you even think of giving up, you already lost. You're done. Because mentally, the customer can feel that. They know it. Let me give you an example. I could have given up lying in that hospital paralyzed and not being able to walk and all that stuff. And even some of the doctors said, look, you're going to be really lucky if you walk out of here. So luck has nothing to do with it. I am walking out of here. And that's just that. The decision was already made. It just had to catch up with me 6 months later. Okay, same thing in sales. Let's talk about IBM. So IBM got started. Here's how we did it. Got to be really creative. It's another key word in this business, the sales business. We had just closed Dell Computer. And I was working with my telemarketer, Carrie Maltzman, and I said, look, you and I are going to craft an email, and it's going to go to the equivalent guy for Dell over at IBM. And so that's what we did. We said, hey, Dell just did this. You might be interested too. Obviously, we were using a little competitive, bantering back and forth between IBM and Dell at the time. And I got a call back the very next day. So you got to be creative. You got to be tenacious. You got to figure out ways to get in. So we went through this sales cycle for a year with IBM. And we got to a point where we had $1 million deal. Raj, I don't know if you remember this, but we actually had that deal signed on December 31st. It was the last day of the year, last day of the quarter, all of that sort of thing. And 3 hours later, This is the hard lesson that I learned, and it took me years to learn this, but I learned it on that day. 3 hours later, they called back. The legal department called me, and they reneged on the deal, and it was already signed. So until money is exchanged, I don't care how good you think the deal is going. It can go away just like that. We never knew why. So 6 months later, I found out why. The guy that ran the sales ops organization had 5,000 people in his organization at IBM. His name was Herb Hunt. And we couldn't figure out, even our internal champions were like, we have no idea what happened. It sucks, but it happened. So what? 6 months later, we found out that Herb Hunt went over to become the CIO of Siebel. So he was in Tom Siebel's pocket the entire time. He nixed the deal. As a result of that, he became CIO of Siebel Systems, brought in a new guy, Vince Ostrowski. We started the whole process over again. It took another 24 months. And then we walked out of there with a software deal of 12, 13 million, another 2 million 2 years later. We were billing $2 million a quarter in services, $2 million a year in maintenance, and we ended up taking $56 million out of IBM. Now, what did that take? It took a lot of patience because here it is, we had this deal done. But if we had done that deal, here's another thing to think about. If we'd have done that deal, we might not have taken $56 million out of IBM. So things happen if you keep at them and stay tenacious, stay hungry, stay courageous. Make sure that you are making all your internal champions long-term relationships and friends. Then nice things can happen for you. Now, does it happen every time? No, it doesn't have to happen every time, but it happens sometimes. And that's enough. So one thing I wanted to share with you also is why people buy. And one of the reasons people buy is something that I call transference of feelings. If I can get you to feel the way that I feel, then you will respond and act the way that I do. So if I really believe that my product or my service or what we can offer you that 10x value, and I can give you that feeling because I feel it, that's called a transference of feelings. That's what causes people to take action instead of sit around doing nothing. So just remember, you are selling to people, and remember that they're not buying your product, they're buying the end result. And don't let your ego get in the way of your wallet. So, Raj, that's a quick summary.
Anup, yeah, thank you, Anup. Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Anup.
I still love watching Rob Milks as he explains what it takes to become a world-class, top-notch sales guy. Clearly, it's a talent that has been honed and developed over 20 years in order to become so, to understand how to do sales in real time. We can do sales, but, in spite of all of that, I think, what you've learned today, as you put it into practice, it'll start becoming natural, right? It's going to help you in every part of your business because you're selling, to your employees, your investors, to your customers, to your partners all the time. So the techniques that you learned today, and you should watch here's the video link to the Rob Milks talk.
I think you can share it on the chat.
And
yeah. All right. Yeah,
Yeah, if we can put it on the chat, that'll be great. And oh, sorry. So if you can put it on the chat, that'd be great. And so if there are any questions we can answer, I think, I've enjoyed this session a lot, brought back lots of old memories, but more important, I learn every time I teach sales this class. And it was fun interacting with Ajay before and today. And all of you, I hope you have a wonderful TiECON Kerala 2020. And, you can always get in touch with me via Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn. And I've got this entrepreneurship channel on YouTube. You can find me, search for me. And you can find this particular video, but many other videos on entrepreneurship related to negotiating, customer care, product market fit, et cetera, et cetera. So looking forward to all of you becoming very successful as entrepreneurs and, more importantly, learning how to sell.
Thank you so
Ajay?
much, Raj. Yeah, I'm here and I'm very much waiting. Can you just put the screen out, please? We've shared that YouTube link already. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Raj. I think I think we have hardly 4 more minutes. So before we close, it's been a very interesting session, but I think we have many questions, but I'll just put in the important ones because of paucity of time. We have only 4 more minutes to go, 3 more minutes now to go. So it was one question from Mr. Allen. He's in fact asking how do you handle the pressure situation when the trust is broken and the company is on the verge of bankruptcy? So that's a twisted question, but I think it would be an interesting answer.
Yeah. So, basically, you're going to have to work hard, no question about it, to rebuild the trust. And, as an entrepreneur, you have to be prepared for your company to go down, right? So, typically the success rate for entrepreneurs is like 10%. So, but really what people are looking for is not whether your company succeeded or failed, but whether you dealt with me with integrity. The message that you heard from Rob Mills was personal integrity. So the personal integrity that you show to your bankers, to your investors, to your customers, as your company is going down, is very important. And because that reputation you're going to carry forward to all your future business startups and ideas and so on. Yes. So don't compromise your personal integrity as your company is going down. So, if it's going into bankruptcy, obviously there are going to be disappointments, but, your personal integrity should never be doubted.
Thank you. Thank you, Raj, for that excellent answer. I think it's very entwined to the subject. I think we have only just 1 more minute to wrap up, so we'll be on time as we've taken up this session wonderfully well. Thank you so much, Raj. I mean, it's been a very, very immersive session. I would say the only time I stepped down was to take the next diary because I was taking so much of copious notes that I ran out of paper in between. That's when you asked the question, I was slightly taken aback. But this has been a wonderful session, and it's been, from the comments which I've got from the chat boxes, it's simple, it's comprehensible, it's simple, and the flow is very, very, normally when we go on to sessions, you get to hear a lot of things which you don't understand, so it bounces off your mind. But I think this has been a session where you could absorb what has been mentioned. It's been very, very simply put, with wonderful examples and real life cases. I had one question, but I think we are done with our time because it's almost 10 o'clock. of how you found, Mr. Michael Dell as the person, as a person, who was the right customer. But I think I'll get that answer privately because we don't have time now. So thanks a lot for joining us today. It's been a very, very, very interesting session. I was wondering how we would, really fill up this 2 minutes, 2 hours very interestingly, but I think it's been done
Went by like this.
with very good justification. Yeah, it just went on. I think we might need more time.
Very
so thanks
fast,
a lot.
yeah.
Thank you very much. And thanks for being with us today on this TiECON. Thank you. Over to you, Hari. I think you are the boss now. You take. Please, Raj, if you want.
No, I
You
think
need to-
I'm totally delighted that, I had this opportunity to talk to TiECON Kerala. And, as people watch our recorded video, I'm sure a lot of people are going to get some very good valuable tips as they go along. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you
this
so much.
opportunity.
Thank you.